Welcome to this explanation of poetry analysis using Tpcastt. Tpcastt is a process that we're going to use all throughout this unit when it comes to explicating and analyzing poetry throughout the given unit. It's also a helpful tool to use on the AP exam for the essay question where a student is asked to analyze a poem. So this Tpcastt it's an easy process to remember and a pretty simple process to implement when analyzing poetry. Essentially, as stated, this is a process to help you organize your analysis of poetry. It's an in-depth analysis, and it makes sure that you approach the poem in a proper step-by-step process. Tpcastt is an acronym, and the first T is for title. So the first thing you'll do is analyze the title of the poem. Simply from the title, not the text of the poem, what do you predict this poem is going to be about? So that's the first question you want to pose to yourself when reading the poem. Next to the poem, annotating in the margins, simply write down your predictions. You very well might end up being correct, you might be incorrect. At this point, it really does not matter, but what is your prediction for what is going to take place within the poem? Later, when we're toward the end of this analysis, we'll then reflect on the title again after we have read the poem. So if your first guess inference is incorrect, again, it's not going to be a major deal because after we've gained more insight and information about the poem, we'll go back and review that title again. First thing you do then is you want to read the poem. And then once you are done reading the poem, you simply want to stop, kind of absorb it, and look over the poem. But first time, just read the poem, nothing else. Only read the poem. After you have read the poem, you come to the P in Tpcastt, which is to paraphrase. And with this, it's simply putting down something in your own words. So what do you think the poem means? So after reading the poem, rewrite it in your own words. This doesn't necessarily have to be word for word paraphrase. You could go line by line or stanza by stanza, kind of depending on the length of the poem and what organizational strategy works best for you. But I would recommend either doing a line by line paraphrase or a stanza by stanza, and this will probably vary depending on the length and the type of the poem that you are reading. Again, the length of the paraphrase, it could really vary depending on the length of the poem. Could be simply 3 sentences or a page. Usually it's going to be more in the middle, but not as long as the poem. Simple paraphrase of it. While this could seem kind of tedious, it's a good way to make you think about the poem line by line, and it makes sure that you don't skip over any concepts, words, images that are present within the poem. After the paraphrase, you come to the C, which is for connotation, and you're really looking at the connotation of specific words. And you're going to be looking for connotations within the sound of the term, such as alliteration and assonance, or you could also be looking at figurative language, personification, hyperbole, imagery, paradox. It's looking for what these specific words are trying to get across, because within a poem, the poet puts particular emphasis on the meaning of individual words. So what type of connotation are you getting for the words? Not just the denotation words, the dictionary definition, but the feeling, the mood that each particular word creates. There's probably going to be words that pop up within each stanza. Again, depending on the length, let's say you have 4-line stanzas, quatrains, probably would be about 2 to 3 words per quatrain, per stanza, that would jump out for connotative reasons. Analyze the figures of speech, the sound elements of the poem. How do these elements add to the meaning? And then comes A, which is for the attitude, or really the overall mood of the poem, the tone. What is the attitude that the speaker toward, what is the attitude of the speaker toward the subject of the poem he or she is writing about? And again, this will kind of go along with the connotation from before, where as you're picking up on these sound terms, these figurative language, as you pick up on some of the metaphors and whatnot, a reader will also pick up then on what the attitude of that poem is as well. So what is the attitude of the speaker toward the subject of the poem? Not your attitude toward the subject, but the attitude of the speaker of the poem. S next in Tpcastt is for shift. And so you are looking for places where there is a shift within or a change within the poem. This could be a shift in time, in tone, in speaker. This should always be noted, as this will also end up affecting the meaning of the poem. So you want to check your poem for shifts. You could look for specific words, phrases, transitions like a next, then, so, or, but, basic words that denote some type of shift. You could also look for changes again within, mentioned the tone, the attitude. Maybe it goes from a hopeful poem to it becomes a little bit more cynical, later on. So there could be various shifts, changes that are taking place. But time, tone, speaker are going to be the most common of those shifts. And again, this really helps with understanding the meaning of the poem. As you can tell, the speaker's attitude at different places as it shifts throughout the poem. And again, most poems, especially the classic literary ones that we're going to be looking at within this course, there's at least one or two shifts within those poems. Mentioned that the title would be looked at again, and that is what the next T in Tpcastt is, and that's the title Revisited. At this point, after you've done a pretty in-depth analysis, you want to reconsider the title of the poem. It's possible that you have gained some extra insight through this whole analysis. It's more than likely that you have, and so you would want to see if maybe your predictions about the poem were correct, or maybe your predictions ended up not being incorrect, but you found out more information. So what other meanings might the title have in light of the analysis that has taken place? And a lot of times, the title might not truly be figured out until the poem has been looked at multiple times. And so a Tpcastt has forced you to read the poem at least about 3 times, and at this point, the title might have more meaning than it did before. If you still have no clue as to what the title means, then again, you want to reread the poem because you're missing something big. While there might be some poems that are rather difficult on the AP exam to initially analyze and figure out, all poems that are present in there do have a main element, a main concept that is being presented, and the title ends up being very significant to the presentation of that concept or that theme within the poem. And mentioning theme, that is what the last T in Tpcastt is for, the theme of the poem. As you already know, the theme is the general insight into life conveyed by the author through his or her work. It is not simply a judgment, such as don't do drugs. It's not a theme. That is more of a moral. But a theme merely states something true to life and the human condition. So you really want to be able to identify the theme. This comes last because after doing the analysis, the connotations and the shifts and the attitudes and looking at the title over again, the theme should be much more present. And again, if you can't decipher the theme to the poem at this point, you would want to reread the poem again until you are really able to figure it out, because all the poems that are present within this course or on the AP exam, there is going to be a definite theme that is being presented by that author. Question that a student tends to have is, how do I end up finding the theme? Well, you want to look at the other parts of the Tpcastt as well. What connections do you notice between these different literary elements? What insight are all of these working together to convey? So the paraphrase, the connotation, the attitude, the shift, the title, there all should be some similarities or some integral parts that they all are trying to convey together, and chances are this will help you identify the theme of the poem. You want to end up asking yourself, what is the poet trying to say about life? And again, it's not simply a judgment, but it is an all-encompassing message about life and the poet himself or herself. So, review of Tpcastt: you make predictions based on the title, paraphrase the poem, determine connotation by searching for literary terms, analyze the speaker's attitude to determine the tone of the poem, search for shifts in time, tone, and speaker, analyze the title again in light of reading the poem, and then determine the theme of the poem based on your readings and the other steps of Tpcastt. Again, this is a good, thorough analysis approach, one analytical approach when it comes to explicating poetry. It's not necessarily easy, but it's a good method to remember. It's a simple acronym. So on the AP exam or within this class, you're going to have to Tpcastt some poems. And again, just annotating on a piece of paper is usually the best way to go about it. Best of luck.